I wouldn't even really call them role models just because they're human. So there are definitely plenty of people that we looked up to, the way that they acted, the way that they held themselves, but at the same time, it was remembering that they still make mistakes too. So it was more, I tried to focus on people I actually knew rather than trying to follow like celebrities or, yeah, there's some athletes that I looked up to, but my biggest role models were definitely my parents, just the way that they worked every day, came home, took care of me and my siblings and just kind of supported us in whatever we wanted to do.
Hmm. Yeah. So speaking of family, obviously family is really important. And looking at your father, obviously playing football, what was that like to have one of your family members who's play sports and give you advice while growing up and having that role model in your family? What was that like for you growing up?
It was normal. Both my parents, both my step parents, they all played sports in college. All of my siblings played or play sport in college. Growing up, we all played multiple sports. I've got a I've got a brother right now who's a professional athlete. So sports, that was our life. That's we did stuff outside of sports too, but everything revolved around us going to each other's games and going to our own games. So it was just a normal thing in our family that like having parents who did sports, you were just expected you were going to play something. It didn't have to be the same sport as everybody else. Like I was also a cheerleader in college. Nobody else in our family cheered. I didn't even cheer in high school,
Wow.
but it was just an expectation. You're going to go off to college. You might not play on a varsity team, but you're going to play some kind of sport. You're going to stay active somehow.
Yeah, so tell our fans about your process. When was the first time you got into softball and baseball? So tell us that process and what was that like, and what was your training routine back in the day, and just tell us about your process going with baseball and softball.
It's probably not as much of a process as it should have been. I didn't start playing softball till I was 13, so the season before my freshman year of high school. I played 10 years of soccer instead,
Okay.
and I actually thought I was going to be a soccer player. Um, didn't make my freshman team, my high school or my freshman year of high school. My mom had put me in softball as my backup sport, so thankfully I did have something to fall back on. Joined the softball team instead. Started at the freshman level. Couldn't throw to save my life. It looked like I was trying to throw shot put. It was pretty bad. Thankfully though, coaches never gave up on me. They taught me how to throw. I started at short and second, and after my freshman fall, they actually moved me to outfield because I was fast. But I never quite learned how to throw overhand. I'd learned how to throw sidearm because
Right.
middle infield. So I played outfield throwing sidearm for 3.5 years in high school
Wow.
without quite learning how to throw overhand. But I mean, my process for me was you give everything you got on the field, and then once it's done, it's done. Like, yes, learn from your mistakes, figure out where you could do better, but you can't fix an at bat that already happened. You can't fix an error that already happened. All you can do is learn from it and then let it go and then just keep playing. So I had this mindset, like I got on the field and I blocked out everything to the point where sometimes I didn't even hear my coaches, and it used to frustrate them because I was kind of just in the zone and at the same time focused on just muscle memory. Everything we practiced, I just let my body take over and I just did what I practiced for hours up until that game. And I also had this mentality of if I didn't get dirty, I didn't play hard enough. And that used to drive my dad crazy because there'd be days where it rained. We didn't get to practice outside. So all we did was go in the cages. And I wasn't happy with that. So I would go out on the field and purposely get dirty just to make myself feel good and then get into his car. So he started keeping towels in the car, especially on rainy days, because he knew I was going to get muddy somehow. As if I wasn't sliding or diving or something, I was not playing hard enough.
Yeah. So so speaking of soccer and obviously, what was the transition like from soccer to softball and baseball? And did you ever think to yourself maybe I could play three sports, or just once you transferred from soccer to just focus on softball and baseball?
So transitioning from soccer to softball and baseball was very difficult. The only thing that really correlates is just the running,
Yeah.
which is sad because I actually hate running, which is I'm kind of glad I did softball instead. Yeah, they're sprinting, but it's not the long distance like soccer. But that's why I actually made like throwing so hard because you don't throw, you throw over your head. I mean, you throw with both hands just straight forward. So that's kind of what my arm action looked like when I got to softball. Was kind of a soccer player, but throwing something smaller. But the idea of just trying hard and giving it all you got for your team, like team first mentality, that's the same. Just being on a team and having people who rely on you to get better and to play hard and give all you got, that was a pretty easy transition. And then as far as deciding like only to play one sport, like I said, I got cut from the soccer team. And at that point, I just kind of told myself, okay, I'm going to give everything I've got to softball. I started playing baseball in college when I joined the club baseball team. And like I said, I was a cheerleader. So I did eventually play 3 sports at the same time. I did all 3 while I was at Dartmouth my last 2 years. And it is very difficult trying to balance all of them, especially when 2 of those sports are technically in the same season. Thankfully, most of our baseball games were in the fall, but I still had cheerleading, which we cheered fall, we cheered winter, and then we competed in the spring. And I never got to compete because I was playing softball. So the balance was difficult, but also having to sacrifice bits and pieces. So once preseason started for softball, I couldn't stunt during basketball games. I could only stunt during the first half of the winter because I wasn't in softball season. Once softball season started, softball was my priority, and I couldn't get hurt doing cheerleading or baseball. So there were definitely times where I'd have to sacrifice, and like I can't do everything that I wanted to do playing all 3 sports.
Yeah, so speaking of cheerleading, some people think it's not a sport, and I do believe it's a sport. And what would you say to those haters that think that this is not a sport? Cheerleading is hard. It takes a lot of practice to get it down, and I feel like this is a sport too. And I don't know why people think it's not a sport.
I'd say the cheerleading they're thinking of is probably just the standing on the sidelines, raising or shaking pom-poms. And I mean, dancing is definitely a sport, but that idea of cheerleading, yeah, that's not a sport. Competitive cheerleading is.
Competitive.
When you mix dancing with tumbling, so basically dancing with gymnastics with strength training and lifting, all in a span of 2 minutes, and trying to keep up that energy, that is definitely a sport. And I've actually done the research. The majority of female injuries or sports injuries actually come from cheerleading. And I can attest to that. I was actually a base. So I'm 5 foot, one of the smallest people on the team, and I'm lifting people over my head and trying to catch them as they fall down. And gravity coming down, if your flyer does not tighten up and get their arms in, you're getting smacked in the face as she's coming straight down on top of you.
Right.
So I ended up with a bruised bone, deeply bruised bone. My freshman year, ended up on crutches at the end of our season because my flyer kept landing on my leg. I've had the black eyes, I've had the bruises, we've had concussions, broken bones. And this was just a club team. We weren't even a varsity team. So that's what I tell the people who say that cheerleading is not a sport. Yeah, shaking pom-poms is not a sport.
Yeah.
Throwing people up in the air and then expecting to do a dance and then expecting to yell and then expecting to do cartwheels and round off and back tucks.
Yeah.
That's a sport.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so I want to ask you now, just tell us, when did you get into the club baseball team, and what was that like playing baseball? Obviously different from softball, getting used to throw overhand. Just did you get to, when you were playing club baseball, did you get to pitch, or you played infielder too there in club baseball? What was that like for you?
No, so I was an outfielder. I think the most special thing that I did was, since in softball I was a slapper, I was able to switch hit in baseball, which was pretty cool. But otherwise, it was just like playing softball. For me, baseball was always a little bit faster, so I enjoyed it more. Yeah, it took a little bit of adjustment with the overhand, but I also, whenever I went to the cages on my own, and even now, I never went to the softball cage. I would take my softball bat into the baseball cage and actually hit baseballs. So as far as like that's concerned, that I was used to. And even in college, we actually used to warm up with baseballs instead of softball. So I was used to throwing a baseball too. So the biggest difference really was just probably the distance for the bases, actually. I remember the first time I ran the bases in baseball and I got to about the 60-foot mark and I was like, wait, there's still more. And I still got to keep going. So that took a little bit of adjustment. And then leading off, that's also a pretty big adjustment. Working on your primary and your secondary, which you don't really have in softball. It's just, you got to time it up with the pitcher differently. So reading the pitcher too. You don't get pickoffs, and or at least not from the pitcher. You don't get pitcher pickoffs in softball. So that was a little bit different, but I was still pretty familiar with it just from having watched the game. I think it was different now actually having to do it, but I picked it up pretty quickly.
Yeah. So speaking of college, obviously you went to the same college as your father, Dartmouth College, and what was that like to play in the same college as your father did and live in that same legacy? And obviously you graduated there with a sociology degree. And what was that like just playing in the same college as your father?
So I'm actually a double legacy. Both my parents went.
Oh,
So since I was 6, that was my goal, was to go to Dartmouth. My parents took me up for homecoming one year. I saw the bonfire. And of course, 6-year-old sees a giant bonfire. They're like, oh, this school is awesome. But thankfully did my research as I got older, got to hear stories from my parents and just the love that they have for the school. I mean, my mom came up every term that I was there. And for those who don't know, Dartmouth is a quarter system. So she was up there 3 to 4 times, sometimes 5 or 6. She would come up twice a term sometimes, and it's not easy getting up there. But being able to go was amazing. It was great. Like my parents coming with me during my freshman year and getting to show off, all the memories and stories that I'd heard, them being able to point out different locations, them being able to go into the buildings and kind of say, oh yeah, this was different, or this is still the same. And what's really cool was actually being able to meet a lot of my parents' friends and classmates during homecoming. So getting to hear stories from them as well was really, really nice. And it's just a nice connector with my parents. And then now being a graduate, both my dad and I actually interview prospective high school students for Dartmouth. And we kind of compete every year to see, how many of our students get in. So it's pretty cool being able to still have that connection. And then with him playing football, and I had been a cheerleader, and I know the football coach, we have that as well. My stepmom went to Brown, so whenever Dartmouth plays Brown, if we get a chance to watch it on TV, it's pretty big in the house. So no, it meant the world to me being able to go to the same school as my parents.
Yeah, so obviously after college, you were pursuing a career in baseball as a general manager, but you got a coaching opportunity in 16 with University of Dallas College. And take us through that process. What was that like for you, getting the first opportunity to coach there and just getting your feet wet in coaching?
So actually, my first coaching role was in grad school. I was a director of baseball operations and graduate assistant coach at Case Western in 15. And so I was there from 13 to 17. I worked with the team all 4 years and then started wearing the uniform in 15, where I started running the drills, throwing batting practice, evaluating our outfielders. I was helping with defensive positioning, scoring our games, keeping track of spray charts and pitcher tendencies. So I was pretty much doing everything. But yeah, it's true. University of Dallas, so that was fall of 18, where I joined them in the fall. And that was my first chance, I guess, really getting to do more. I was doing the similar things that I was doing at Case Western, but rather than also being a student and doing other jobs, because I was way too busy in grad school, that time, they kind of gave me an area to really focus on.
Right.
So I was with the hitters a lot more. I helped with the infielders actually before I worked with the outfielders, but I helped the head coach with the infielders, videoing practices, and then kind of, evaluating after, same thing, scoring during practice and keeping charge of fall stats. And then pretty much anything that they said, if there's anything that you think we could use, just let us know. So that was pretty cool being able, I did get my feet wet there. It wasn't as long as I'd liked. I was only there for the fall since I got the Reds internship after that. But I was also a youth academy coach with the Rangers too at the same time. So I was kind of pulling double duty and then getting to coach younger kids. That was really different because I usually had somebody else who was working with me. So there's always 2 or 3 coaches at a time. And then there was one day where they said, hey, we don't have anybody else. You've got the younger kids for by yourself. You've got about 15 of them for an hour. It's like, great. How am I going to keep, 10 to 13-year-olds entertained, 15 of them by myself, and still get them the practice that they need? So that was probably one of the bigger lessons that I had was, lesson planning and being more effective during a short amount of time and making sure everybody gets what they need without anybody feeling either left out or left behind, or they're just kind of standing around doing nothing because I'm working with somebody else. So it was definitely an interesting experience for those several months that I was doing both.
Hmm. Yeah, so this is a two-part question here, and first I gotta ask you, how do you balance all being obviously playing three sports, and how did you balance it out? And the next part to this question, what's it like just to share your stories and help these young kids develop into great players and trying to reach their goals? And what's that like? What's that been like for you?
So the balancing, it's a lot of time management. I have a to-do list every day. I basically write it out weekly. So every like Thursday or Friday, I write out my to-do list for the next week and then just keep that updated. And it's on my computer, it's on my phone. I also have my Google Calendar and just making sure to prioritize. And unfortunately, there are times where I have to tell people, sorry, I can't because I already have a prior engagement.
Right.
So that was the biggest thing for balancing, but it was also unfortunately sacrifice. I've told people, I tell people even now, I had no social life as a student. I still have no social life. I'm in the off season and I still don't have a social life. But part of it is like I'm willing to make that sacrifice.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it's true that it's really hard to have everything. It's really hard to work this hard for something, especially when for a while you don't get paid. So you have to still have a paid job. You have your volunteer coaching position. You might be in school. Something's going to have to give. And one of that is like either you're going to go out with your friends or you're going to go coach. Or in my case, sometimes it's you're going to go out with your friends or you're going to study. And even now with the off season, I've got a lot of professional development plans and I've got family who said, oh, this is your off season. Hey, can you come visit? I'm like, I can't. I got conventions. I've got clinics. I've got things that I still need to learn. There's still so much more that I can learn and give to our guys. And unfortunately, that means I got to sacrifice time with family and friends. So that's how I've learned how to balance is just, it's a pretty bad cliche, but eyes on the prize, honestly. It's just staying focused and having the friends and family who are willing to understand that this is what I want to do. So that means they're just not going to see me all the time.
Right.
And then sharing my story with, kids who they want to fulfill their dreams. I mean, even my players, it's interesting because, at the time that I was going through all of this, I never thought this would be something that was inspiring to people. Because for me, it was hard.
Yeah.
It was incredibly difficult. It was incredibly frustrating. And there were times where I wanted to give up. And thankfully, again, with those family and friends who supported me, they pushed me to continue. Even now, it's still kind of mind blowing that people want to hear this.
Mm-hmm.
Because for me, it's just like, this is just my life. This is how it's always been. I've always been busy. I've always been striving for something greater. I mean, you can ask my parents when I was younger, I used to even talk to them about how I always felt like there's something more that I needed to do. And that's how I kind of approach everything I do, that no matter what I recognize when I have succeeded in something, but I also recognize there's always more that you could do. There's always a way to get better. So for me, it's almost like it's never really enough. I'm happy with what I've done, but I also recognize there's more still to do. So it's been interesting with people wanting to hear the story, where for me, I feel like it's not even close to being done. Like I barely scratched the surface of everything that I want to do and that I think I'm capable of doing.
Yeah, no, see, no, your story is really inspiring. And like I said, I have a team of 8 people on my show that helps me out with the show, and 4 of them are females. So I'm giving every opportunity to females to start their sports career. And women in sports is growing big time, and it still needs to grow. But I'm liking it right now where it is heading. It's heading into the right direction, and we just have to keep pushing forward for you guys to give you guys more opportunities in this industry. And you're the definition of women in sports, Bianca. I mean, you're like I said, your story is really inspiring. So, yeah. So I want to ask you now, before we go any further with your coaching career, I want to tell our fans, what would you say your best moment and your funniest moment as a soccer player, softball player, and a baseball player?
Oh, that's hard. Um, Soccer player, I wouldn't say it was my funniest moment, but I look back and kind of laugh now. But I played in a league where everybody played soccer. And that means all of my classmates played soccer, all of the neighboring schools played, and sometimes you played against your classmates.
Yeah.
Well, I had a good friend who was on an opposing team one year, and we were pretty rough and aggressive when it came to soccer, to the point where she actually bent over in the middle of a game and flipped me
Mm, wow.
during the game.
What?
And like I said, I laugh now. I mean, because we were what, 11? And she just randomly flipped me in a game as I was running at her.
Oh my god.
Um, and the only reason why I can laugh now is because I was just as brutal. I mean, like I said, my dad played football. He was the
Yeah.
linebacker. He taught me how to run. So until I started playing softball, I ran with my elbows out, and I hurt people. And I'm kind of ashamed of it now, but I definitely knocked out a few people. One of my first softball, actually, that kind of leads into the softball one then. But yeah, I kind of, and I was a defender, so I kind of aimed for shins if I couldn't get to a soccer ball. Because to me, I'm thinking, oh, you're wearing shin guards, it's okay.
Yeah.
But anything you need to do to get the ball. Um, so for softball, again, not really the funniest,
Yeah.
but I kind of laugh about it now. So one of my first softball games, I didn't know how to slide yet, and people always seem surprised when they hear that, and they ask, "Well, isn't there sliding in soccer?" Well, there wasn't sliding tackling allowed at my age yet. I never got that far in soccer, unfortunately. I think I would have been really good. But I was at third. There was a pass ball. Of course, catcher goes back, pitcher goes to cover the plate. I did not know about the rule that you had to slide when there was a play at the plate.
Hmm.
So I kind of thought about it for a second, but then, my body reminded me, hey, you don't know how to slide yet. So I just kept running through the plate with my elbows out.
Wow.
Well, I hit the pitcher. um, we both fell, and I just hear people yelling, touch the plate, touch the plate. So, I get up, I touch the plate thinking I'm good. Of course, I'm out, but then my dad comes on the field and goes, are you okay? I was like, yeah, dad, I'm fine. I'm standing, I'm good. He goes, no, not you, the pitcher.
Ugh.
And I turn around, pitcher's knocked out on the ground.
Wow.
Apparently, she flipped over, landed on her pitching arm, was out for a week.
Hmm. That's crazy.
And so that's when I finally started to learn how to run with my elbows in
Yeah.
and how to slide.
Yeah.
Then for baseball, it's really sad that all my funniest stories end up with somebody being hurt. But
Oh,
so I guess funniest one for baseball was so in 2016 I actually tried
it
out for
could
the
be
women's national.
it could be best moment too. It doesn't have to be funniest moment, best moment in your career.
Well, that's the thing. Those are the ones that I remember the
Yeah.
most.
Hmm.
And because otherwise, the only other one I could think of for softball, or at least the best moment, was my freshman year. It was one of our first games. We were tied 4-4. I think it was the seventh inning. And our coach comes in the dugout, gives us a speech. Hey, somebody's got to step up. We got to win this game. So I get up with bases loaded, and I hit a ground ball to second that bounces over the second baseman's glove. Right fielder wasn't backing up because she assumed the second baseman had it. So it rolled all the way to the fence, and I ended up scoring on that play, and we won 8-4.
Hmm.
I completely destroyed my leg because I tried to slide into home and I still didn't quite know how to slide. So I ended up, I still have scars. And this was in 2004, or no, 2005. And I still have scars on my leg from that. But it was still pretty cool to win that game. And then baseball. So in 2016, I tried out for the women's national team. I didn't make it. I gave myself 3 months to, practice and get back in shape. And that was not enough. But I didn't make that decision until pretty late. But anyway, I got there. I told them, I played outfield. Had played infield. So they put me at second for a game. And there was a pop fly between me and the right fielder. And I forgot to call for the ball, but she also forgot to call for the ball. So I'm going back. She's coming in. And at the last second, we see each other. So she tried to go high. I tried to go high. She tried to go low. And she ended up clotheslining me. As the ball is landing in my glove, I land on the ground, ball pops out. So, of course, I'm upset by that. But got the wind knocked out of me. I finally caught my breath, finished up the game. Next day, go back into tryouts, and I tried running, and I could not run at all. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't get a breath. So I saw the trainer. She said, yeah, you really bruised your ribs yesterday. You might be done.
Wow.
So I talked to the right fielder after. She felt terrible. And she said, honestly, I didn't call for it because I forgot you were also an outfielder. I didn't think you had the range.
Hmm.
And I realized it was pretty far back. And it's not really a funny story, but it's one of those things, again, that I just kind of remember because for me, it was a lesson. Doesn't matter what position you play, you call for the ball. One. And then it's kind of just also reminded me, for me, it's like I kind of regret not trying to push through those bruised ribs. I don't think I still would have made the team because there's some really good women baseball players out there.
Right.
I mean, really good. I've been following the national team for a while. I'm still in touch with some of them. So I don't think I would have had a shot, especially seeing as I hadn't practiced for a long time. But I do wish I hadn't given up so quickly and pushed through and at least finished out that last day and been able to play. If only just to be able to play. So while it might not have been my best or funniest moment, it was a really important one for me because it kind of taught me like I did need to be a little bit tougher. Yeah, it hurt, but that's also the price you pay to be an athlete. And at least mentally and emotionally, sometimes it's the same thing for anything that you're striving to do. Like I said, it's not been easy trying to be a coach, but it's totally worth it in the end.
Yeah, that's great. That's some crazy stories right there. And yeah, so now continuing with your coaching career and trying to get to your dreams, and obviously you got an opportunity in baseball operations with the Cincinnati Reds as a trainee for a little bit, and then you got hired as a hitting coach and baseball coach, hitting coordinator at Carroll University in Wisconsin. So tell our friends about those two opportunities and what was that like for you?
So the Reds was an awesome internship. Like I said, it was baseball operations trainee. When I applied, they knew I wanted to be a coach. So when they offered me the position, they said, we're going to put you on the player development and scouting side. So you still have that access. You still get to sit on like player plans. You get to go, we'll send you on scouting trips. You'll be in charge of the minor league board. So you'll get to learn the player development system, which especially now I think was really helpful because it gave me a better, like an insider understanding of how the minor league system works. But of course, the best part was when I reached out to the coaches and asked for advice. They didn't get a chance to sit down with me. So I said, all right. I printed out my own version of our scouting report on our team, went down to the field during batting practice and just took notes on everything, not just the players, but I was watching the coaches too, seeing how they observed, observing like how they worked with the players, the type of drills that they were showing the players, just the way they interacted with them. And that's when Donnie Ecker, who was the hitting coach or the assistant hitting coach at the time, talked to David Bell, got me on the field. I remember my very first day on the field, I was standing off to the side because I'd already gotten yelled at by the grounds crew about standing on the grass. So I'm like, I have no idea where I'm supposed to stand. I've got my badge like right out in plain view, so nobody questions if I was supposed to be there. I'm trying to watch batting practice, and Donnie sees me and goes, no, Bianca, come over here to the turtle. Angles are good. Walk around. You're fine. And that's when I finally started to feel more comfortable and eventually got to the point where I was catching in the coaches for batting practice. I was catching in the players, warm them up. I was catching it during infield practice. I mean, if the coaches, like all the drills that they were doing, they were kind of giving me advice, me even just hitting fungo, different things to work on, and then doing different projects for the coaches. I was in the clubhouse during all the games. So I got to know some of the players. I mean, it was a great experience and it definitely helped develop the way that I coach. And then just the different things that I think could be useful depending on which organization I'm with. And then going off to Carroll, that was an interesting one just because I mean, I'd applied for assistant athletic director of compliance, which my only college administrative roles were director of baseball operations and compliance assistant. So jumping into an assistant athletic director position, and it was my first full-time job ever, was a huge jump. And people would joke about it. They're like, yeah, you really don't do anything half-assed, do you? It's like, nope. I figured let me go from intern to assistant AD. But yeah, they agreed to let me also coach baseball. And initially, I was just an assistant coach. I told the head coach I was interested in working more on the hitting side. So he said, great, you're going to be our hitting coordinator. You run the program. And another kind of jump where I was like, okay, never done this before, but I guess I'll figure it out. And COVID actually ended up helping in that aspect because that first season, I had no idea what I was doing. I know everybody has to start somewhere, but I felt completely just overwhelmed, like I was drowning. And getting that opportunity during the quarantine to listen to other coaches, watch or sit in on Zoom calls, different clinics, conventions, doing the certifications, that finally kind of gave me an idea. Okay, now how do I want to build a hitting program? What do I think is the most beneficial? What do I want to pull out from all of the stuff that I've learned to develop my own version of a hitting program? And then being able to go into the 2021 season prior to joining the Red Sox. So I did get to be with Carol up until end of March. So like their first 3 weeks of the season, I think, I was still with them. So I was still going to games, obviously, still coaching, still ran the program, and I was handing over the reins to our student assistant coach who's still there. But that is definitely a type of experience that I needed. It is incredible. Like I said, it was overwhelming. It was scary being just thrown in. I mean, forget getting your feet wet. I got my whole body wet, like with no swim lessons. I got tossed into the deep end.
Yeah.
And I think that was the best way to do it because I could have either drowned or I figured out how to swim. And that kind of gave me the confidence that I needed. I'm like, okay, if I can figure this out by myself, then I think I'll be fine. And I even tell my supervisor now, like, I know the hitting side, I know outfield, I can work with infield. You want me to learn pitching and catching? I'll do that too. Like, I don't want to be just a hitting coach. I don't want to be just the outfield coach. I want to be that coach where guys trust that even if I don't know something, I'm going to go research it as much as I can and learn about it as much as I can. And if I can't find something, I'm going to ask somebody else. So even if a pitcher has a question for me, if I don't know something, I'm going to say, hey, I'm going to find out though. I don't know now, but I'm going to figure it out. And they trust that I will actually figure it out.
Yeah, so before we get to your Red Sox opportunity, I want to ask you about the women coaches now in Major League Baseball. Obviously, Rachel Bokovich with the Yankees minor league team. We had her on the show last year. Actually, it was an honor talking to her. And then now you have Alyssa Nakin with the San Francisco Giants. So what's it like seeing the game of baseball heading into this direction now, hiring women coaches now on the bench or hitting coach or either in the minor leagues too?
It's about time.
Yeah.
Especially and it's not just in baseball. I mean, there's so many sports.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at basketball, soccer. I mean, there's nothing more transferable than men's soccer to women's soccer. It's the same sport.
Yep.
Baseball and softball aren't the same sport, but there's still so much that's transferable. There's no reason why even a softball coach can't come in and coach baseball.
Yeah.
And for all the people who say, oh, well, you've never faced a 100-mile-per-hour fastball. Like, I dare you to stand in from 45 feet away and see a 75-mile-per-hour softball coming at you. It actually comes in faster. And guess what? The swing is the same thing. Catching a fly ball is the same thing. Fielding a ground ball, it's the same thing. The only thing that's different is your arm action when you pitch. And base running is a little different too, but the idea, the aggressiveness is still the same thing. The strategy is pretty much the same. So I don't know. Yeah, it's like for me, I think one of the reasons why it took so long is one, not to say anything about women in baseball, but I mean, I know for me, I never thought about being a baseball coach.
Right.
It took me a while just to even realize that I could work in baseball. I mean, I was immediately just put into softball. I never even had the opportunity to play baseball when I was younger. The only reason why I played in college was because the club baseball team started up. And at that point, I was like, well, I'm just going to try out anyway. It never occurred to me that I wouldn't be able to do it because I was a woman. All I needed to do was see that opportunity, that it was there.
Yep.
So it was the same idea, even, wanting to be a general manager. It had nothing to do with me just not seeing women who are general managers. It never occurred to me again to work in baseball because it's not really something that people talk about working in sports. And then becoming a coach. I mean, I'll admit that I do realize that it probably had some kind of impact on me not seeing a woman who was a coach, which is why I never thought about it. But if I let the idea that at the time when I wanted to be a coach, there were no women baseball coaches that I knew of. If I let that stop me and push me into softball, I never would have done this. So part of it is just kind of, I mean, the visualization of women in baseball, I think it's definitely going to help in the future now.
Yeah.
But I think it is, again, it just never, it wasn't a thing that was thought about before. And hopefully now that, there are more women getting into the game, there are more women that are being seen in the game, because there are way more women in the game than I thought.
Yeah.
That's the other thing. A lot of people don't realize that this is not just a new thing. Like, there's actually quite a few of us, not just in coaching, but scouting, operations, the business side. I mean, people ask me about being the first African American woman. I'm like, well, I'm the 7th woman who's coached professional baseball.
Right.
I mean, think about that. I'm the 7th to do it. And then there are women coaches in college. And the number of girls who are now playing baseball, they see this too. So I mean, it's definitely it's just opening doors, which I think is great. But I do think it needed to happen sooner.
And then now, obviously, now we have a GM in baseball with Kim Nang with the Marlins, so she's doing a great job there. That's another thing. Hopefully, happens more female GMs in baseball and other sports also. So for you, take us to the opportunity. Obviously, you were in Cal University at the time when you got the Red Sox opportunity. So for you, when the Red Sox came calling to you, and how excited were you for the opportunity? And what was it? How tough was it leaving Cal University? But obviously now you're getting a much bigger opportunity here in your career.
I was super excited. I mean, it was honest, I was kind of 50% expecting a coaching offer. When I initially started interviewing for position, it was actually for a scouting/player development hybrid role. But my experience with coaching, my passion for coaching came through in my interview. And they kind of started having me interview with, player development, our hitting coordinators. So I had a feeling that something was coming. I just still wasn't sure if it was coaching. So the fact that it was a coaching position, and it was the first time I got to coach where I wasn't working another job, was huge. But it was very difficult to leave Carroll. I mean, those guys are my kids. I still have guys that will FaceTime me at 10:30 at night just to say hi and just to talk. I'll actually, part of my off season, I'll be heading back to Carroll, still figuring out the logistics, but the plan is to head back and help them out during their preseason. So I'll still get to see them again. I still have guys sending me their video, asking, hey, can you take a look at my swing? Is there anything I need to work on? And then, just seeing how they're doing. I mean, I try to keep in touch with them, even if it's just to say happy birthday, just to check in. So it was really difficult to leave. Actually, I'm still on the coaches group chat.
Oh, wow.
And I don't have the heart to say, hey, can you take me off? I'm like, I don't want to be taken off just yet. I love seeing how they're still doing. I love seeing like everything that's going on. So it just shows you, like not just how much of an impact they've had on me, but hopefully the impact I had on them, that I'm still seeing how they're doing. Like, I've got incoming freshmen this year who I never worked with, who, know who I am. And I'm so excited to be able to go up there and actually meet them and continue to, help them develop. Because it's hard when you leave a job like that, even for an amazing job like I had with the Red Sox. It's hard when you put all that work in and you've developed these relationships with your players. It's hard leaving them.
Yeah, that's awesome right there. And just to keep keep in touch with those contacts, and it's really important especially in this industry, and to see how players are doing, and how it work, and then for them to still say that Bianca Smith helped them in a big way, it's truly amazing. So for you, obviously you got the opportunity as a minor league coach, where it's based off of Fort Myers, Florida. So what was that like this year? Obviously spring training, but going into the minor leagues, what was that experience for you coaching in the minor leagues with Boston?
Hot, humid. I wasn't used to that. I haven't besides the University of Dallas, I haven't coached in the heat. And actually, even that was during the fall, so it wasn't even that hot. But no, it was a great experience. I mean, the guys were great, and the team was awesome. We had a great year. They were really receptive. I mean, there are always a couple of guys. It took a while, but by the end of the season, I feel like I developed some kind of relationship with all the players. The staff they're amazing. I tell them they're the annoying older brothers I never wanted. They really are. I mean, they tease me, they mess with me, I tease them, I mess with them all the time. Um, I mean, we text each other. I mean, that was one of the things, like once our instructional league ended, one of the coaches, one of our fourth coaches came up and said, "Hey, text me over the off season." Like, yeah, I know, I got you. um, but I mean, it really was a family, and I mean, it's bound to happen when you're spending 10 to 12 hours a day with everybody. Like you get really close to them. But it was a great opportunity. I mean, I learned a lot. I got to do a lot more than I expected. And I mean, I'm excited to build off of that. Like I said, with the off season, it's a lot of professional development. I'll still be coaching, so still get to stay fresh. But I'm sure I'm going to be learning so much more this off season that I'll get to bring in next year and just keep working at it.
Yeah, so I'm a Yankee fan like your mother, I'm a big Yankee fan, but I have lots of respect for the Red Sox, the way they go about their business and rivalry. Whenever they play a different team, I put the rivalry aside because I love watching sometimes Red Sox baseball because they play with tough. You guys play with toughness, and especially they have a lot of great prospects coming up soon. So for you, what do you like? What's it going to be like in the future? What do you like about the Red Sox future now? Because this season, no one expected you guys, the major league team, to go as far as they did before. They almost went to the ALCS, but for you, I mean, they were in the ALCS. But for you, what do you like about the growth of the Red Sox and the future of them?
Yeah, I think that's just a testament to our entire organization on just that belief that one, it doesn't matter what other people say. Doesn't matter what the predictions are. What matters is that game at that time, just one game at a time. And then once it's done, again, you lose, you mess up, you learn from it, you let it go, and you get better.
Yeah.
And I think like that's one of the things that the Red Sox truly believe is like anybody can win, anybody can do well. You just need to develop that mentality that you can do this. And I think that's really important, especially for guys that don't make it, either injury ends their career. That's not over. I mean, that's not the end of it either. I mean, that's another thing I've noticed. Like if guys end up leaving or deciding to retire, they're not all of a sudden not Red Sox anymore. Like we still try to help them out. I mean, so that's something. I mean, everything that we try to teach them in this game is something that they can use once their career is done too. I mean, as far as our prospects and our teams, though, all of our teams did well this year. Really, I can't wait to see how a lot of these guys do. Like I've been impressed working with them. And yeah, I had the rookie guys, and I think considering the season we had, I mean, we didn't start off the strongest, and it wasn't even because of lack of talent. These guys put so much pressure on themselves.
Right.
That it took them a while to just kind of relax and play the game again. But I mean, that's what I mean with the Red Sox. Like we expect to do well. And I love that. I love that there's no expectation of, oh, well, they predicted us to do poorly, so we're just going to do poorly. No, it's like, we don't care if they predicted us to do poorly. We're the Red Sox. We're going to do well. That's what we expect. And it's seeing that in all of our guys where they expect themselves to do well. They expect themselves to get better. They're always asking questions. They're always asking ways, hey, what can we do here? What did you see here? What do you suggest? I mean, they're open-minded. They're hungry to learn and hungry to get better and continue just working hard. And that's why like I'm excited for the future of the Red Sox, because I've seen this in like every guy we've had or every guy that I've worked with, is that they want to get better. They want to work hard. They want to win championships. And that's something you can't really teach.
Right.
I mean, talent, even it's skill, you can definitely teach. Talent, yeah, that's naturally born, but you can still cultivate that. That mentality of wanting to win and wanting to be better, that's something that just comes from the player. So having a player like that, that's like a dream for a coach. There's not much more you need to do as a coach. Because I mean, they're going to be receptive. And I love it. It makes our job easier. And this is certainly not an easy job, but it also makes it a lot of fun. Because while the guys push themselves and they want to work hard, they also just love the game. They love having fun. They have fun in the dugout. They have fun on the field. So that's what made this season amazing. And what I mean, like I said, I'm excited about the future of the team.
Yeah. So did David or Big Poppy reach out to you, or have you been? Did you contact Big Poppy or get?
No, he hasn't, but I'm sure eventually I'll get to meet him. And it's a little difficult with major and minor league spring
Yeah.
training being separated this past year.
Yeah. It'll be he obviously Boston favorite, Boston great. So hopefully you get to connect with him soon. And I want to ask you for next, what do you most for yourself? What are you most looking forward to for this upcoming year? Just continuing to grow as a coach, and will you get and what's going to be like once you get the opportunity to maybe eventually help out Alex Cora on the bench at some point in the major league team?
Well, for that second part, I have no idea what to expect, and I've learned to just live with that.
Yeah.
It's actually a lot easier to have in some cases not as many expectations. Like I said, I had no idea what I was doing coming in this year. My official title is minor league coach. There's no hitting coach. It's not pitching coach. It's not outfield coach. And honestly, that's what I love, that freedom to be able to do what I'm interested in, but still develop in other areas. So that's kind of my expectation, is just to continue to develop. Like I said, there's so much more that I know I can learn and that I need to learn. And yes, I've learned a lot so far, but this game is always changing. Despite what the purists say, this game actually is always changing. There's always something new to learn. And just because it's been one way for decades doesn't mean it can't get better. Doesn't mean there's not another way to do it. And there might be chances where like I learned something different. We might not want to use it, and that's fine. But at least I learned it. At least I know that there are other opportunities, because you never know. It might work better. Like a different drill might work better for another player, and
Yeah.
we're just not aware of that yet. So just saying that, hey, we're good, we figured out everything, that's not good enough.
All right.
So that's what I'm looking forward to the most. And that's always what I'm looking forward to every year, is being able to utilize what I've learned during the off season to not only help our team get better, but to become the best coach that I can be for our guys. Because that's what it should be. Like, we don't do this for us. We do it for them. And like one of my philosophies is that coaching, like as a coach, I should become obsolete eventually.
All right.
It should get to the point where the players are their own coach. They're their best coach. If they don't get to the point where they don't need me as anything more than like a sounding board or maybe some minor adjustments, then I haven't done my job. I haven't actually taught them anything. All I've taught them to do is just listen to me, and that's it. And that's not good enough. I need to get them to the point where they can make their own adjustments. And to do that, that's when I need to learn more than just one way to do things. Because just telling them to do something and making a cookie cutter doesn't work. They're humans, their bodies are different. There's always going to be a different way to do things. So again, that's what I'm looking forward to the most, is just continuing to build off what we've done this past year and see where it goes.
Yeah, so before we get to the last two things, obviously this week we had some devastating news for Boston. The longtime Red Sox commentator Jerry Remy passed away with cancer, and I don't know. So if what was your reaction when you saw this news? And obviously, he's meant a lot to the game of baseball, to city of Boston. And what was your reaction when you heard that news?
I'm be honest, I actually didn't know who he was
Oh, okay.
prior to the news. Um, I mean, obviously, I saw how much he meant to the Red Sox. I saw how much he meant to, Red Sox fans. But I didn't grow up a Red Sox fan,
Right.
so I wasn't too familiar with who he was. I've learned definitely a lot more now. So, like I said, I've seen how much it means to the Red Sox and the nation. But at the time, I'm gonna be honest, really wasn't much. I actually don't listen to commentators when I watch games. I typically put it on mute.
I feel you. So the last two things here, our team is part of this foundation. It's called the Hugh Jackson Foundation. He's a former NFL coach. He's now the offensive coordinator at Tennessee State with Eddie George, and we're trying to help him prevent human trafficking, making sure the community stays safe, the kids stay safe. So we'll send you the foundation so you can go check it out.
Okay.
And the last thing here, would you like to say anything to all the nurses, doctors, and all the essential workers right now?
Thank you for everything you've done. And I mean, I can't even imagine everything you've been through so far. I mean, my stepmom's actually a surgeon,
Oh,
so
wow.
I'm always worried about her whenever she goes into work. So definitely thank you for everything. And I know it can't be easy right now.
Tell her we said thank you for her service.
Will do.
Well said. And there it is. That wraps up episode 931 with former soccer player, softball player, baseball player, cheerleader, now current coach for the Boston Red Sox, Bianca Smith. I just want to say thank you for joining our show today. It was truly an honor. I learned a lot today from this, and keep up the great work, and good luck to next year. And obviously this off season, continue to grow. And people need to hear about your story more. And just keep up the great work. And we would like to have you back on the show at some point down the line so you can meet the full team. But like I said, thank you again for coming on. And you're truly inspiration right now.
Oh, thank you. And thanks again for having me on.
Anytime.